What is Operation Libero? I would say Operation Libero, we actually think the liberal democracy is the best political order, and we are here to defend it. We're here to fight for its institutions when it is necessary. And so we also think that actually serious Democrats, as we here, I may assume, in the human rights gang are, we actually think that this liberal order needs to be defended, and also we need to make sure that people have a deep understanding and a serious commitment to the values that these institutions represent. And that's what we basically want to work for. That's what Operation Libero is trying to do. I'm sorry, is it annoying you, the sound? Yeah, like this? Okay, I try like this. Do you still hear me? Great, okay. Yeah. So just to quickly give you a little bit of context about Switzerland. Usually we're not part of the avant-garde quite in Switzerland, but when it comes to right-wing populism, I'm afraid I must admit we are. Basically, since around 30 years now, soon, we have a really strong, on-the-rise right-wing populist force who in the last elections, 2015, went up to 29%. So it's the strongest party in Switzerland. And what they actually do is they strongly shape the public debate. They strongly put the issues on the agenda. They somehow push every other political party before them because they have the money, because they have the influence, because they have what I call the sovereignty of interpretation over how we should speak about things and what we should actually speak about. So basically, it goes back to 5 years now that Operation Libero was founded, because the moment was actually the exception of a law, as Friso mentioned, where we said, this is not as we see Switzerland any longer. That's not how we want to live in this country. This right-wing populist party sees our country as a shut-down kind of open-air museum, instead of what we want to see it as a land of opportunity, an open country, a prosperous country, a country which is in move, which is in motion, which is really also aware of its humanitarian tradition, and of course facing the challenges of a globalized and more digitized world, but not like just shutting down and trying to protect the country by just closing the eyes, right? So that's why we actually stepped up and said we want to found a new movement which comes up with these liberal values and fights for the vision of Switzerland, which is an open country, and so on. And since 2014, we have fought 7 referendum campaigns against the right-wing populists, and we won in all of them. And that's actually quite a nice story, I think, because it really came down to things like, labor immigration here in Switzerland. That's a big thing, you know, and that's the biggest challenge we're going to face soon, but I will come back to that. But so far, it was about a law on rule of law, one on naturalization, facilitated naturalization of third-generation immigrants in Switzerland, one on asylum seekers. Also, the right-wing populists wanted to abolish the public broadcasting station, imagine. For example, last November, we also had an important vote, and I'm going to come back to that, on a sort of Switzerland First initiative where the right-wing populists wanted to impose Swiss law over international law. And it would have caused eventually that Switzerland would have to step out of the European Human Rights Convention. So, it's my pleasure to maybe share some aspects of our work, how we operate as Operation Libero. And first of all, I want to make this clear distinction between strategy and tactics. I think that's super important that we have a clear strategy before we start acting. And when I speak about strategy, one of the most important things, and I'm going to come back to this, is framing. But I want to first start with some examples of our work and illustrate it also on the screens so you have a bit of an idea what we're actually doing. And also, what already came up in your speech, Friso, is that what we have to focus on, the people we have to focus on, and that's also what Operation Libero strongly believes, it's not the already converted, not the ones that anyway already love human rights and think it's very important for the world, but it's rather the sort of conservative, maybe a bit nationalist-oriented, insecure middle ground, I would say, who might have an open ear to right-wing populists and nationalist attempts. So basically, that's the people we need to focus to, and that's where we need to be really clear when it comes to strategy. And so I start now with 3 little case studies about framing, because we think it's a very important step to be sharp on leading the narrative whenever you want to fight back a nationalist and right-wing populist strategy and communication. So basically, there was in 2016, there was this one law on the so-called Durchsetzungsinitiative, let me get here, the Durchsetzungsinitiative, which means expulsion of criminal foreigners. That's how the right-wing populists called that one initiative. It basically meant that all of you who might not be Swiss, and if you have lived in Switzerland, you could have been eventually been kicked out of the country, for example, for driving 2 times too fast within 10 years. It happens to everybody, right? I mean, driving tickets, it's annoying, but happens. But you know, such simple aspects should have really caused the expulsion of an individual, of a family, father or mother, and there would have been no room for personal hardship for the judge. So to us, that was just unbelievable that the right-wing populists, who of course wanted us to speak about criminal foreigners, that's what they wanted, because if you speak about criminal foreigners, you're of course on the winner's side. You're basically shaping the battlefield, and everybody who's going there is defending criminal foreigners. That's just a lost cause. Don't do it. Don't. So what we actually did, again, when I come back to the groups, the target groups I spoke before about, we thought, okay, we need to find a way that these people understand why it actually matters to them, why this law is endangering their freedoms and their rights, their institutions. And we chose deliberately a really patriotic way to argue. We said, this is about our constitution. This is about the rule of law and the principle of proportionality as it is written in the constitution. And that's so decisive to all of us. Imagine if you would stand in front of a judge. Would you want him to look at you as a person and to take your personal circumstances in consideration? Or would you just want to be an automat who just says, you were driving 2 times too fast, you indicated the wrong information in your social insurance form, kicked out. That's the question. Answer it for you. And that was so powerful, it turned out, because people started to realize that it's actually not about these criminal foreigners that everybody has some evil face in his mental mind, right? But it's about everybody here, and it could be your colleague or your boyfriend or, And so that was actually a really, really important moment in the campaign. And also for this, I want to illustrate here how we basically tried to illustrate the situation. There was Helvetia, she's the mother, the allegorical figure of all the Swiss. She's on every coin. She's a really proud lady with a wonderful, how do you say, and she's standing there, and actually she represents all the liberal values of our institutions. And the wrecking ball, of course, is this initiative, the Durchsetzungsinitiative, who smashes her away. And I try now to show you the video. Maybe it's working. I try. And are you doing something, or should I do something? I don't know. No, it starts again. Can you maybe push it, no? It doesn't matter if not, it's fine. Now it's working. We should go back now. You hear the music, you hear the dramatic sounds. She's falling off. Now she's under the wrecking ball. Yes. So you know now the plot, okay? Cool. This is not from my presentation. So, here we go. What I want to show you here is one way, it's a really provocative quote, and I'm happy to discuss it more with you later on. But once a journalist asked me in this newspaper, it's called 20 Minutes, which is really like an everyday newspaper, everybody reads it, but you don't have much space there. And she asked me like, but what does it mean, principle of proportionality? What is this? Huh? And I said, well, basically, it's a question. The judge as an automaton, there is such thing only in Sharia law. That's where we know it. That actually there's one thing just accepted without considering any case of personal hardship. And so that's really how we try to transform this actual principle of proportionality into what it would mean. And I get back to give you a bit more context about 20 Minutes so you can understand more clearly why it actually can make sense to put out such extreme ways to illustrate things. What I want to say is that in the end, we were lucky to celebrate a big success, and actually the most joyful quote I heard from the leader of the right-wing populists after this vote was accepted was when he said, I don't know what happened, but at some point everybody spoke only about rule of law. And we thought, yes, that's what worked. Actually, we forced them away from their battlefield where they had to explain to us why they are attacking the constitution and the liberal values which are in there. And it was no longer on us to explain them why we are defending criminal foreigners. So Helvetia was happy as well. Now just the second case, and I go through much faster now. That is one on the facilitated naturalization of third-generation immigrants. In Switzerland, we have 25% of all the inhabitants don't have a Swiss passport. And it has to do with the simple fact that naturalization laws are so strict. Still for third-generation members, who some of them have never lived abroad in their whole life. So they actually, Switzerland is their home, it's their home, it's their home. And we don't even know why actually it has to be so complicated to become Swiss for them. And expensive, by the way. So anyhow, it mostly, here, that's the point we wanted to make. It's like two women who very much look alike. One is called Vanya, the other is called Vanya. And we just say, hey, they're both Swiss, they both are here, and you need to find or imagine a difference between these two women. So why should the one who doesn't have a Swiss passport not just become Swiss because we think that's our home and she's part of our community? So that was that case. And the other one I want to make here is the vote on the so-called self-determination, a term that many of you also hear, of course, in the public discourse in many European countries these days. That's a case strongly made by right-wing populists. And in Switzerland, that really, I already mentioned, it was a vote on putting Swiss law over international law, so totally mixing up the legal order hierarchy. And as I said, in the most extreme consequence, Switzerland would have had to leave the European Human Rights Convention. So again, we played on the really patriotic story of William Tell that some of you might have read in school. And it's really like a myth which is played a lot by the right-wing populists in Switzerland. And they really see it as a really patriotic thing, William Tell fighting against the Austrian European, how do you say, Gessler, the Vogt, I don't know, who knows it, the tyrant, basically. And so he's the brave one fighting back, And so we were actually challenging this. We said, at the very beginning, what is at the core of the William Tell story? Actually, it's the three states who swear together that they want to stick together in whatever test they need to go through. They wanted to to give their word, basically, to stick together and to hold together. They wanted to make a contract. And that's what international law is about. And it helps more than also to small countries like Switzerland, which highly depend on international law. And what does the one guy here, see it on the right on top, do, who doesn't actually want to give his word? He's crossing the finger behind his back. So that was kind of playing with this patriotic storytelling also, and somehow regaining it back from the right-wing populists who always use it in their way only. This one myth to Switzerland. So basically, I just want to give you 2 quick book tips, maybe really practical, on what political framing is about. And now it gets a bit more theoretical, but the thing is really framing, also how George Lakoff sees it, is basically not to think of an elephant, or how I would put it, don't sing their song, sing your own song. The importance there is that actually frames, you cannot see them. It's really, it's just the way people perceive the world. It's kind of what is common sense, what is considered common sense. And that's usually what we think about a lot when we do political campaigning, when we prepare a strategy. That's the core thing of a political strategy. What is common sense now, maybe? How do we maybe want to change the common sense? And what do we think should be at the core of the message? And I'm really happy to talk more about this. A second book I would strongly recommend is The Righteous Mind of Jonathan Haidt. There also you can find more like a psychological background also on these whole aspects. And then let me get to some tactics now. After the strategy part, I want to move on to some tactics. And here, my most important point would be try to be popular. You can be popular without being populist, I'm telling you. Seriously. And that's the challenge we have to face. If we are all super well educated and smart and well researched and data-based people, amazing. But we need to translate it in a way that people can understand it and can take it and can digest it. I think we should be the kind of translational service. That's a job we have to do. We need to approach the people. We cannot wait until they come. So that will be my maybe most important message. Then the second one is what I call the 50-50 formula. That's really the thing. If you step in front of people, 50% is preparation of content, but the other 50%, it's of course how you say it and communication. My thing is the ratio. It's not 80-20, no. We're living in a media society, it's 50-50. And also where it comes to the brave new media world, I called it here. I mean, just to come back to this example of the Sharia before, of the 20 minutes, just to give you, like this newspaper, that's the biggest newspaper. It's not the NZZ anymore in Zurich, which is read by lawyers and, studied people. No. It's 20 minutes. That's a quarter of the Swiss population reads this newspaper every day when they're commuting. And imagine how deep it goes when it's called 20 minutes, this newspaper. So it's really superficial. And if you want people to really get what you want to tell them, you need to be on page 1 to 3 maybe, because mostly people don't read any further. And if you really want to get there, you need to be able to say your message in 1 picture and 5 words. That's all you get. That's how it is. Brave new media world, but we somehow need to accept this. And I really think, and that's the job again we have to do, you can't say substantial stuff in 1 picture and 5 words, but it needs a lot of translational work, of course. And here again, stick to your strategy. That's really important with all the tactics. Never leave your strategy, because I think that's a mistake many people do. They don't derive clearly from a strategy all the tactics they take. Stick to your own song. And here maybe some last points on tactics as well. We of course work at Operation Libero a lot with social media, because it's also a really cheap way to communicate for us. We work a lot with memes, with GIFs, videos, testimonials, also from celebrities. That's also a way to broaden, of course, the attention of people, because they can, they already refer to celebrities, they know a bit of images of these people, and when they stand for something good, it's easier to access it for them. We also do a lot of fact-checking. We also even use it as a campaign tool. To give an example, in this one campaign on the Durchsetzungsinitiative, the first I showed you with Helvetia, there was just a few weeks before the vote, the right-wing populists sent out a sort of extra blatt to all the Swiss households. which was full of wrong facts and wrong statistics and everything about immigrants and criminal immigrants and so on. And what we basically did, that was on a Saturday, it was in people's households. On Sunday, we were fact-checking it and took out 10 of the biggest lies that were there. We were proving it, just. On Sunday night, we sent out a press release to all the Swiss newspapers. And the following week was issue number 1, fact-checking the SVP. So the media did their work again, sort of. They went back many years and also showed other statistics that were wrong in previous votes and so on, and it harmed a lot the credibility of the right-wing populists. Still, I would say it's worth doing the fact-checking thing. I saw your shirt here. Maybe you can quickly show it to everybody. It's written, facts do not cease to exist because they're ignored. That's what Aldous Huxley said. Again, Brave New World, yes? So that's, I think, a really, really important thing. Do fact-checking and believe in it, because I think it has an effect still. And then one last point, we have a group on social media. This is activists, social media activists, who under their private accounts actually go and argue with trolls. They are putting out arguments. Sometimes we facilitate them with memes, for example, to, again, you have an argument to make, but you could also put it in a meme, for example, so in an image with a sentence on it. So it's much easier to spread the word in much less time. So that's basically what the online warriors do as well. And they're a really great entity, basically, of our organization who do important field work. So that would be my quick wrap-up of what we do. I'm really happy to take your questions now. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Flavia.
Thank
Wonderful.
you.
Good. Questions in the back. Israel.
Hi. Thanks. Israel Butler from Liberties. You mentioned fact-checking, but then there's a lot of research that shows that myth-busting is counterproductive because it tends to reinforce the other side's frame. So I was wondering how you fact-check without myth-busting and giving the other side's frame more prominence.
Yeah, I think we do. Yeah, it's a really important point. But again, when we do our memes or whatever messages we want to spread out, like the arguments to counter the right-wing populists, then we of course always try to get back to our strategic communication. So to somehow tear the arguments, back again to our battlefield. So that's, I think, again, where I would say stick to the strategy and really try to be coherent in your tactics. Is that fine for you then? Okay, thank you. Yes?
A next question or comment to Flavia. Yeah.
Thank you. I was just wondering how you saw yourself as an organization in terms of a campaign, and does that mean primarily online? But the move offline, how's that reflected in how you see yourself as an organization?
Yeah, I mean, we're still a really young organization, maybe, to start from that, and it wasn't all very planned when you got to that campaign. We really just tried to do what we did. There was a lot, of course, online, and that was really just out of practical reasons, because that's where we, in the end, still were stronger and could develop more of a performance also. It was easier to spread the message there, because also in the context of Swiss politics, just to give you this example, the right-wing populists are not as strong as we are on social media, like the party itself. Of course, their troll farms are very active, but basically the right-wing populist party itself isn't. So for us, there was a big field, and we saw a big niche to cover. But of course, offline, that's where they are really strong. And we also try to face this, and we also go out in the countryside, if I may say. And I myself come from there. That's where I grew up. So I know a bit how it's going there, I'd say. But basically, we see that this is still a bigger struggle for us to bring it offline, because it means a lot of organizing and a lot of also, of course, financial, questions. Yeah. Did I answer your question? Yes. Thank you.
Next question, you.
Hi, my name is Jill van Hoof. I work for the Fundamental Rights Agency. You started out with 4 students. You said you're a political movement, not a campaign. Could you say something about, when you talk about we and us, that's probably not those 4 students anymore?
No, right. So back then we were basically really like PhD students and students with a lot of free time, and that's what actually I think made it all possible to start off so successfully. Today, that's basically, if I also may talk about, of course, struggles, at some point now we all need to earn money. We're at the beginning of our careers. We're around 30 years old, 30 to 35. Some of us have families now, and, just the situation is changing. So the question is really, what is the next step of professionalizing and making it sustainable, if we want that, because we still see a lot of need for it, of course. So that's an important thing. We now have an office with 6 employees, which helps to professionally support all the volunteers which are there next to the board, which is also volunteering. And that's maybe to talk a bit about the structure. So we have this board of 10 people, we have the 6 people in the office, and then we have a base of basically more than around 3,000 active people who are organized offline mostly, and who go and, for example, distribute flyers and whatever we have to do to campaign actions for us on the grounds. Yes. Yeah.
Yes, Thomas Huddleston from the
Please
Migration
switch it on.
Policy Group. So you mentioned 7 referendum and the Swiss Love referenda. So these were not the only ones that you wanted to fight. So what's your decision making to decide which campaigns you go for, which ones you don't? Are there some steps that you always go through, or has it always been a different process every time?
No, we have a certain catalog where we try to objectivize sort of our decision, where we, whatever referenda you say is coming up, and then we somehow proceeded through this, but in the end it's the board who will decide. And to be honest with you, we mostly focus on the one referendums where we think there's not enough of, as we call it, liberal reflexes active, kind of, because also in the past we realized that sometimes the other parties, especially the Christian Democratic Party and the FDP, the Liberal Party, they sometimes just overtook the narration of the right-wing populists without really reflecting what harm they cause with this. And basically that's when we see this happening again, and gladfully it happens less and less with the party losing. That's a swift we see, which goes back in the right direction, in the good direction. We see that this is actually what we want to happen, and where we hope that there are less and less of these referenda will come up, where we would need to jump in order to defend, and that's one procedure we're in now. I mean, one day hopefully we can more go over into shaping the agenda or being proactive instead of only reacting on what the right-wing populists do. But I think that's a kind of I see it as a jiu-jitsu move, there's the force coming there and we have to, and then so.
We have 2 final questions. The first one by Bettina, the second one by Friso.
Thank you very much. I have a question, very practical. Who's doing the visual work? Are you working together with a consultancy or agency, publicity? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or are you doing it by yourself?
Yeah. So it's a mix of in-house and other, all the strategic thinking, the framing thinking. This is always made in-house. And that's also the cool part about it, I must admit, because that's a really creative work in the end. You need to reflect a lot on, okay, what is out there, what can you refer to. It's also historical work sometimes, and it's really, I find it super creative and interesting and fun. And then once we are sure what we want to communicate, what is our main messages, main arguments, that's also a lot of content work, that's where it always starts. From the content, we then develop the strategy and the communication. we give it mostly outside the house because we're not able to really do this. But then again, when it comes back to distribution, like social media work and so on, we have our geeks in-house, yes.
But, and this is not yet my question, so this is an illegal extra question. For instance, your motto, which I find fantastic and really inspiring, die Schweiz verwirklichen, and in English it's realizing Switzerland. So you do not even need 5 words, but only 2.
Mm-hmm.
Did you make that up yourself, your group, or
Yeah.
was that a branding or
No.
PR company?
No, at the beginning, I mean, really, we were just us, the few students, who then wrote down our kind of manifesto, the one Switzerland should be a land of opportunity, not an open-air museum. We everything did it by ourselves. There was one who was a journalist. He was kind of professional. He, for example, told us, hey, guys, we should have professional photos before we go out to public. And we should also have a press release, sort of, because otherwise nobody will realize. And we should also make a press conference if you want to kick it all off. And that was actually the first, steps we did. So only, and also this one campaign that I showed you with Helvetia, that was mostly like made, I cannot really tell how it was made. It was really on some scruffy papers. We designed a strategy, and I still have it at home because it's kind of where it all started.
It's brilliant.
Exactly, yeah.
Flavia, then the final question is, we were grateful that you're here anyhow, but particularly because in 2 or 3 weeks from now you have general elections in Switzerland. Could you very briefly tell us what I find very special strategy is there? Not being a political party yourself, but a movement who reaches out to other parties.
Yeah. So basically it's a test. I must admit we will see only in 2.5 weeks how it turned out. But the idea is to say what we've seen in the past legislation period, like the 4 years since 2015, where again the right-wing populists were the strongest and the Social Democrats the second strongest, but with like only 22%, I think. We realized that basically it's all about polarization and nothing is moving forward. It was only going to the extremes. There was a lot of blockade in many, many important issues. So basically, when we speak of land of opportunity and progress, we think of something else and we think of a different parliament. So what we want to do is basically, and that's what we did, we reached out to party members and candidates from all the parties except the right-wing populist party. Forces where we think, and we asked them whether they would collaborate for progress instead of polarization and blockade. And that's what they sort of agreed on. They said, yes, we see your point, and we think that's a really, really good point to make, and we want it to actually happen. And so we agreed on 7 subjects, like a big variety, marriage equality is one, till European relationships, and so on. And so now we campaign on these issues and we support these candidates in all the cantons where we think there is a chance to win a chair. Because basically what is at the very heart of the idea is that we realized in the past legislation period there were mostly only 5 to 8 seats which made the difference for a law to be accepted or to be refused. So it's a really simple thought. We just thought, okay, so we need to get in these 6 to 8 people, and that's what we hope to be able to do.
Keep us posted.
Yes, we will.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.